now, and South Africa is in for another week of rolling blackouts. Power cuts will continue to be implemented at various stages throughout the week. Eskom saying some capacity is offline due to planned maintenance and breakdowns. Let's get more on this, and we speak to energy economist Lungile Mashele, who talks to us from Pretoria. Lungile, good morning to you. So you are of the view that Eskom should be focusing the attention on what they have said is reliability maintenance, and that talks to the age of these power stations. You have Professor Mark Swelling, on the other hand, who was talking to us just this morning, and he says get rid of these old power stations and replace them with renewables. So, motivate for your position.
It's a very simplistic view, Tolly, of looking at replacement completely. We do know that renewables happen to have a lower load factor as well as a capacity factor. So they're not necessarily available in the evenings when we need them the most. And this is why even in the evenings we do go into stage 6 load shedding due to the demand that is required. Currently we are sitting at a demand of about 32,000, anything between 32,000 to 34,000 megawatts required capacity in the evenings, which is what we do not have. Eskom, on most days, I think it was on Saturday, only gave us about 26,000. It's very easy to want to replace them with, renewables. But firstly, who's going to pay for these renewables? Contrary to popular belief, they're not as cheap as what people think. And we're seeing this now with bid window 5, which closed much lower, lowest that we've ever seen in this country. But now there are talks that that tariff is unsustainable, and the bid and the project developers actually want a revised tariff. So this fallacy that it's the cheapest is not only about that. We don't only procure for least cost, we also have to procure for capacity as well. What will be available morning peak, evening peak, what will be available for mid-merit base load, and for peaking as well. So it's a very simplistic view of saying let's swap one with the other. You're not comparing like for like. And that is incredibly wrong. And this is why so many countries around the world are facing a situation where they might have to load shed as well.
Well, let's stick with the question around old power stations. While we're on that question, Lungile Mashele, Germany, we understand, is now on its way to reviving its coal power stations. How old are their power stations, and compare their age to ours? Because they want to revive their power station. Now they're coal-fired power stations because of the energy crisis they're facing.
So Germany has a wide range of power stations, some as young as about 10 years old, and they were looking at actually mothballing those by 2030. So they were going to bring them to retirement very, very early on. They've got much older fleet also at about 40 years, and older. So they've got a varied mix of what they can bring on. But the key thing with, Germany, as with Hungary and the UK also, is that they are talking about mothballed plants that they want to bring on. Now, if you recall, South Africa did exactly this in 2008, 2009, where we returned to service our own mothballed plants. So that was the first stopgap that we did when we experienced load shedding. So it's natural that the rest of the world would also do exactly the same. Problem is we haven't progressed past that point, and now we're talking about decommissioning new, or well, not new, but other power plants as well.
Yeah. Eskom has been talking about reliability maintenance for some time now. What do you think is going on? And I'm asking you this question because I read in a newspaper, it's not something that I have asked them specifically through these media briefings they hold. And the understanding, at least through that newspaper article, is that the focus seems to be on bringing on board new procurement and energy reliability maintenance, which is what they have been saying they are doing. It seems to be falling by the wayside. Is that your understanding as well?
Absolutely, Polly. For the longest time, I think it's been Jan Oberholzer who's been basically saying that they need the space in order to do reliability maintenance. And this is why they then went on a risk mitigation IPP program to buy them that 2,000 megawatts that they require. And that quickly changed from a 2,000 megawatts requirement to anything between 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts that they need. So their situation also changes very, very rapidly, and it beats the level of procurement that we're actually working at, or at the rate of procurement that government's working at. You will recall that they requested this 2 years ago. So far, only about 150 megawatts of that has reached or has been approved, and the rest of it is basically stuck in procurement processes and is stuck in legal processes. Part of this was actually the car power ships that had to be brought online to resolve this crisis as well. So there's certainly a delay even on that side, which unfortunately will delay the reliability maintenance that has to occur. There has been talks of rather procuring additional capacity as opposed to reliability maintenance. This is a very contentious view, and it is absolutely wrong. You do need both, and in my personal belief, you do need procurement that needs to come from the private sector through embedded generation that is not involved with government at all. Governments must just give them the leeway that they need, make sure that they adhere to Eskom's technical and operational requirements ultimately, but let the private sector procure. This will reduce the burden on Eskom for supplying them, number one, but also on the diesel spend also, which is like a runaway number for Eskom at this point.
Well, you do lead me to ask the most obvious question on people's minds, and I suspect they're not even concerned with that, because it's now just anger that has taken over because of this constant subjecting of South Africans to load shedding. Who should take responsibility then, given what you have explained, that reliability maintenance seems to have taken a back seat? Who should be blamed? Is it the striking workers who we are told have pushed Eskom to implement stage 6 load shedding, or is the issue more with reliability maintenance that is not being done sufficiently?
Well, the reliability maintenance needs to be planned for, and you need about 24 months notice prior to actually executing. You need the correct skills, you need the money, and you need the time. Eskom has not been able to do this. When the CE first came on board, he said load shedding would end within a year. He then said he needs another 6 months extension. That was given, no issues asked. Now we are sitting 2.5 years later, and the situation has still not been resolved. Who should take the blame? Eskom, definitely. The executive committee, the board as well. And remember that they have to send all this information through to the DPE, who's their shareholder. What has their shareholder said? When their shareholder sees this non-performance, and remember that in their shareholder compact, one of the key things there is about energy availability factor and keeping it at a certain level. So when the shareholder sees this document, what do they think? Do they think that this is okay? Do they think that this level of plant deterioration makes sense? What corrective measures are they taking? So it's Eskom, it's government as well, that need to take blame for what has actually happened.
You do prompt a few other questions, Lungile, the way that you are responding here, because as we read in the newspapers, the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, is reportedly not seeing eye to eye with his counterpart at Mineral Resources and Energy, that's Gwede Mantashe. And the question here has to do with who is doing their job or who is not doing their job between the two ministers. We can't have two people who hold such important portfolios bickering while the economy is going to ashes.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think this is one of the most hardest points, and it speaks to failure in terms of oversight as well. You have the DMRE, which does policy like on their side, and it talks about procurement. And over the last, let's say over the last 2 years or so, there's been bid window 5 that has gone out, when most recently bid window 6. We've also had the risk mitigation IPP program. And for a number of reasons, these have been delayed or have been caught up in licensing issues with the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, as well as the regulator having to issue licensing. So yes, you can apportion a certain blame to the DMRE, but also let's look at the Department of Environment. Let's look at NERSA also and their processes. Let's not even forget Eskom here, because they also have to issue cost estimate letters to the various project companies which have been delayed. So it's a multi-pronged issue, but more than anything, the shareholder of Eskom is DPE. They ultimately take the responsibility. They ultimately are responsible for what happens at that utility and whether who goes and who stays and the performance that was signed up for that is not being met.
Should Pravin Gordhan keep his job?
That's a difficult one, and it's a very layered one. If you're speaking about his performance at, let's say, SAA, looking at Eskom as well, why should he keep his job? They don't. I mean, we have unparalleled, unmitigated failures at those SOEs, and I'm just referring to those two. I don't even want to go to Janelle, etc., etc. And for me, more than anything else, Polly, is that there is an economic cost to load shedding, and we're talking about stage 4, about R1 billion a day lost to South Africa's economy due to load shedding. But of course, there is a social cost. And the person that you had interviewed prior spoke about their gate and, and their safety and the issues that they face. But truth be told, just this morning, we woke up and we were told that 4 kids had died as a result of a power, when the electricity came back on, there was a power surge, there was a fire, and 4 kids died. And that is the most painful thing, because it's avoidable. And you basically have government leaders that are power-mongering at the expense of 4 dead babies.
And the argument is just ideology. I cannot believe it. Lungile Mashele, if you don't answer this question in less than a minute, I'll be fired myself here. Do you believe in the story of sabotage, the sabotaging of Eskom power plants by workers?
Personally, I don't. And I think when we speak about sabotage, we need to be very careful here. Sabotage was experienced in the Kawarabasa line in about 79, where they cut the lines. This was Frelimo. Sabotage was when MKMBA bombed, Koeberg. When we speak of workers' vandalism and workers fighting or protesting for their rights and inadvertently causing load shedding, I think that's a completely different thing. I don't think that they go there with the intention of bringing us to our knees. It's purely theft, or it's vandalism, or it's angry workers, but this is within Eskom's locus of command and control ultimately.
Lungile Mashele is an energy economist. Thank you very much for your insights there.